Good morning to our viewers here in Nigeria and those who are watching us online from across the world. Thank you for joining us on this morning's edition of Breakfast Central. I am Osa.
And I am Olive Emodi, excited to be back here on television. Today, Friday, the 26th of July, the very best day in the year 2024. You want to ask me why?
No, I don't. If you check the United Nations days for today, it is International Day of Olive Emodi. It is her birthday, so happy birthday, Olive.
Thank you, Saturday. Thank you. I had hoped HR would give me a public holiday because, you know, there is public holiday today in celebration of my birthday. There
is a public holiday across Lagos.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Thank you for joining us once again. Remember to be a part of the program sometime in the second half. If you can call the numbers on your screen at that time and share your thoughts with us on any of the conversations that we're having this morning. But of course, Nigeria is in very, very interesting times.
Indeed.
There's still more conversations about a protest or no protest. There's many people adding their own, 2 cents into whether there should be a protest or not. So let me get your views, first of all, on the reaction so far concerning the idea of a protest.
I mean, I don't think that it's shocking or it's something that's unexpected, the reactions for and against, because yes, those who argue that there can't be a protest are right, because constitutionally, citizens are guaranteed the right to peacefully protest, to complain about whatever issue. They're allowed, the peaceful gathering. So those who are in support of it, I can see why they would say that there is that. But I wasn't, taken aback by the fact that there are people who have spoken up against it. As of course, there would always be supporters of the current administration, or supporters, and those who would say that this is sabotage, those who would, the most interesting one would be the ones who said that the protest is sponsored by Peter Obi and the Obedience. I had waited for them to share the facts and the research that has been done to support the fact that Peter Obi was the one who sponsored the protest, or Peter Obi supporters are the ones encouraging the protest. I think the one thing that we can all categorically agree on is the fact that Nigeria has seen really turbulent times in the past months or past year. And it's not unexpected to see that people will then decide to say, you know what, we're going to speak up about it. Also, when it comes to conversations about protests, what we then see is that it can be replicated in different parts of the country. When Kenya's protest started, I wasn't surprised that we started to see replica protests or replica talks of protests in other parts of the country. So there are certain things like that that then spark like wildfire. So when one country does it, before you know, the other country realizes, wait, we have the same problems and we're keeping quiet, we better speak up. And then we start to see a replication in different parts of the continent.
That's right. I've spoken, and I'm sure I'm going to bring this up later when we talk about our top stories of the week, but I've spoken mostly this week about the reaction of the Nigerian government, and I've said that it shouldn't be so difficult, right? Because we're seeing pretty much the same reaction we've always seen, which is to antagonize, to threaten, to call on governors and the army and the DSS to release statements, against the protest, which is the stereotype Nigerian government's response to criticism on this level. And I've said it that it's either the government has failed to communicate effectively its plans for Nigeria in a way that calms the nerves of the average Nigerian and makes them truly believe that we are in safe hands, that there's no need to panic, there's no need for a protest. We're in safe hands, it's going to be rough for a year or 2 years, and things will get better. They fail to be able to communicate that. It's either that or there's no actual plan that they have to communicate, and they don't even have clarity enough within themselves to be able to communicate it. The president has a 1,000,001 spokespersons across the whole country, not just the president, the vice president, the Senate, National Assembly members, and none of them has been able to actually carry a message to the Nigerian people that tells them that they are in safe hands. And for me, that's really the problem. And even when they have, there is a huge trust deficit. It has always existed, but this current government has made their trust deficit. They've created their own trust deficit. The one that existed with the Goodluck Jonathan administration, the Buhari administration, has always been there. But this particular government their actions have created their own personal trust deficit with the Nigerian people, and so it's difficult. That for whatever it is that you're saying, it seems like people don't believe you because your actions don't seem to match your words.
And just to further add to what you said about communication, when Kenya's protest started, many people argue that if William Ruto's communication style and body language were different, a number of the deaths could have been avoided if he had communicated with them from the jump in a way that made the protesters feel seen, heard, and feel safe, maybe the results would have been different, which is why a number of people would say now that here in Nigeria, we don't want to make the same mistakes. We want to ensure that we have a proper system, a proper channel of communication. What would be great would be to have the president address the nation.
Yeah.
Have a one-on-one, maybe not one-on-one, but like have a town hall of some sort where you can answer questions and just let people know what the plans are. Let people know that you feel their pulse.
Very true, 100%. And that one I also said yesterday that the previous administration had its own blueprint with which it acted, which is President Muhammadu Buhari stayed in Aso Rock for 8 years, barely had press statement, barely had media chats, had no communication face-to-face with the Nigerian people, with the media. And that's the same thing that this current administration has carried now. Instead of doing better, they have decided to copy the same blueprint. But the rest of today, of course, we would x-ray some of these things and see, where things lie between now and the 1st of August. Let's bring you breakfast headlines this morning before we get into our top stories. Now let's begin with the August 1st nationwide planned protest. President Bola Tinubu has met with traditional rulers at the Aso Rock Villa, Abuja. Leading the delegation of royal fathers were the Sultan of Sokoto, Mohammed Saad Abubakar III, and the Ooni of Ife, Adeyeye and Ogunwusi. Although the agenda of Thursday's meeting is yet to be known, it may be related to growing calls for a nationwide protest against economic hardship, scheduled for August 1st to 10th, 2024. The protests, organized under the hashtag #EndBadGovernance, have gained significant traction on social media, even though the organizers remain largely anonymous, with no group officially claiming responsibility. Now, in the meantime, Nigeria's former Minister of Education, Obiageli Ezekwesili, has advised the Nigerian government to stop threatening citizens who wish to exercise their constitutional right of expression, association, and movement through a nationwide protest. Ezekwesili demanded that the government should ensure protesters are protected and supported by security agencies. She added that the leadership and members of the National Assembly, as well as governors across the country, must not waste the golden opportunity the planned protests are offering them as holders of public positions. And to a very sad story now, the founder of Iwanyanwu National Football Club and President General of Ohaneze Ndigbo, Chief Emmanuel Iwanyanwu, is dead. This was confirmed in a statement on Thursday by Jide Iwanyanwu, the son of the late Chief Emmanuel. According to the statement, the 82-year-old Iwanyanwu died on Thursday after a brief illness. The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Mahmoud Yakubu, has declared that the electoral umpire is capable of successfully conducting local government elections if saddled with the responsibility by law. The commission's boss made this known when he appeared before a joint National Assembly Committee on Electoral Matters to present the Ondo and Edo off-cycle elections budget on Thursday. Mahmoud said that the commission can conduct local government elections if the responsibility falls on it.
Is any specific thing you would like to know about the position of INEC? But so far, we have had three broad arguments or positions canvassed. One, transfer responsibility for the conduct of local government elections to INEC. The question is, and that's probably what this joint committee wants to hear, if that is done, can INEC cope? I will come back to that. The second proposition we have had is that no, there should be a new Federal Electoral Commission for local government elections. And then thirdly, there is another argument that no, leave the state electoral commissions to conduct local government elections in the spirit of federalism, but find a way of ensuring that they improve on the conduct of local government elections.
Still in the news, the Nigerian Senate has commenced moves to unravel the circumstances behind the importation of hazardous petroleum products into the country. The 15-man ad hoc committee constituted by the Senate leadership reinstated its commitment at its inaugural briefing on Thursday in Abuja. Chairman of the committee and leader of the Senate, Femi Bamidele, said that the terms of reference will see them invite relevant stakeholders to answer questions regarding the shortcomings of the petroleum sector.
Addressing fundamental issues that pose grave threats to our economic prosperity, fiscal stability, and public health as a nation. In line with our mandate, we will definitely unravel the roots of economic sabotage in Nigeria's petroleum industry and make necessary recommendations that will entrench global best practices in the industry and open it up for more investments, especially in the midstream and downstream sectors. We are utterly committed to this mandate. We shall also carry out this national assignment without fear or favor. We shall be fair and just to all parties with a view to promoting and protecting the strategic national interests of our fatherland.
Now, at least 20 people have been killed on Thursday in an attack blamed on militants affiliated with the Islamic State group. The attack, attributed to the Allied Democratic Forces ADF militant group by area residents, took place in the Beni territory in troubled North Kivu province. The victims were said to be cultivating their fields when they were ambushed. The farmers were killed by gunshot or knife wounds in a village around 30 kilometers from Oicha, where most of the bodies were brought. The mayor was not able to specify the exact date of their deaths. And that's all on Breakfast Headlines. And let's go back now to Breakfast Central. Stay with us.
Now, this morning on Breakfast Central, let's share with you what our top stories are. Nigerian governors meet, vows tight security as protest looms. Remember, the protest is scheduled to hold from the 1st to the 10th of August. Dangote eyes Gabon's market amid tension with Nigeria. Away from Dangote's story, we have updates regarding traditional rulers urging youths to shelve protest plans. Conversation about the proposed Oro festival will come up. 5 dead as construction building collapses in Lagos. That's not good news. But we have the newspaper front pages where we have you calling and be a part of the conversation. All these and more on Breakfast Central.
Traditional rulers in the country have called on citizens to shun plans for the upcoming nationwide protest, saying there is need for patience as the federal government resolves issues affecting youths in the country. Now, this was after a meeting with President Bola Tinubu at the State House in Abuja, where they commended the president for engaging with the nation's citizens. Amading Uyi reports.
The meeting was the first of its kind, with the president, members of the Federal Executive Council, and traditional rulers.
The very first time, the traditional rulers were properly engaged in terms of the plans of government and governance, their achievements so far, and where they are having challenges.
The Ooni of Ife, while speaking to newsmen after the meeting, commended the president and his cabinet members for recognizing the role of traditional rulers.
Stewardship from the Federal Executive Council directly to the traditional rulers. It has never happened in our nation before, never. This is the first time we are all experiencing it. We have traditional rulers that have been on the throne for 40, 50 years. Today is the very first time we will be addressed properly by the Federal Executive Council.
The rulers urged those planning to embark on a nationwide protest not to take the laws into their hands.
It is very difficult to build, but it is the easiest to destroy. We are all stakeholders of this country. We should be stronger as a nation together than stronger individually. The president has said it and he will continue to say it. Any leader that you don't like, wait and vote him out. wait and vote him out.
This protest, I know that it's catching you very, very high in your neck, but if you give us the chance, let us not destroy our own country. I ask you, think of Libya. Libya was a beautiful country. What has happened to Libya, we don't want it to happen here.
The message we are taking back to our people is to be calm, to exercise patience, and also to listen to the words of wisdom coming from the traditional rulers, from the governors, because we have spoken to the president and he has given us the blueprint of what he has been doing over time.
The Emir of Zauzau revealed that the rulers also tasked the presidents to address insecurity.
We have made it very clear to him our main problem in this country, especially in the north here, is security issue. If the security situation is addressed, certainly people will go back to their farms. So the issue of hunger will drastically, go down and it will disappear.
The traditional rulers are also calling on youths in the country to have patience with the current government. In Abuja for News Central, I am Amadine Uyi.
Thank you, Amadine, for that report. Of course, there are several people who have been reacting to this, whilst some are arguing in favor of the protest. There are those who are arguing against it and asking that we, have some patience with the government, they say. But despite the federal government's plea for young Nigerians to shelve the August 1st protest, there seems to be no indication that Nigerians are backing down from the protests. In respect of this, governors across the country are taking proactive steps to ensure the safety and security of citizens. In an emergency meeting held yesterday, the Nigeria Governors Forum, NGF, resolved to work closely with security agencies to prevent any potential breakdown in law and order.
Meanwhile, the Director of Defense Media Operations, Major General Edward Buba, has disclosed that intelligence at military's disposal shows that the protest would be hijacked by some unscrupulous elements. State governors are urging protesters to remain peaceful and avoid any actions that could lead to violence or anarchy. Now, joining us is the former Minister of Youth and Sports, Solomon Dalung. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good morning, Nigerians.
Good to have you join us. I'm going to start with your reaction to a statement that was made by the Ooni of Ife, that says that there's no need for citizens to protest, that the right way is to wait and vote him out, like the Ooni of Ife said. So let's get your reactions to that. Do you agree with that narrative? Should Nigerian citizens, instead of expressing themselves via peaceful protest, simply just wait till 2027?
Well, I think the reaction is evidence of disconnection from the reality on the ground, because the youth who are majorly involved in the agitation and organizing of the protest are far ahead of the government and the traditional rulers. So these patients they are now deploying as a strategy should have come long before now, because the protest notice was rolled out about a month ago, and we are barely 3 or 4 days to when the protest is scheduled to commence, and they're now calling for patience. Then they have enough time if there is genuine commitment to tackling the issues the youth have raised. Sadly, the issues were not on the table in terms of this conversation, but patience was just the only thing that the government was emphasizing. What of the issues that are agitating the minds of the people of Nigeria, the poor and the young people, that are basically the factors that were the people driving the protest. So to me, the issue of patience does not at all seems to indicate that they are connected to the reality of the ground.
So when you say that the issue of patience, it doesn't show that they're connected to the reality. What body language or what actions will communicate that they are connected to the reality of the average Nigerian?
they would have been talking from the point of the state of development with the protest. That is where the young people and the demand for the exercise of their constitutional rights beginning from 29th to 1st, depending on the location. But from everything that went, I mean, it was just merely of acknowledgement of their recognition by government and being a historical act by government, and then the call for patience. But even on the side of the government, the briefing the traditional rulers claim, or the royal fathers claim to have received from the government, I mean, those not at all affected positively what the people are saying. Nigerians are saying that, look, the policy of government has instigated untold hardship, and we cannot survive anymore. That same policy too failed to that the policy too failed to address the issue of insecurity and the issue of the rises of cost of living. So in my mind, I think there was nothing basically that was discussed there that seems to be in touch with the protest.
Yeah, I mean, now we're seeing, conversations between Mr. President and the state governors. We've also seen that he has called traditional rulers to Aso Rock also to meet with him. None of this, seems to be a conversation with the Nigerian people. It's instead speaking with the governors and traditional rulers. And so do you think that that is also getting it wrong? Is that the approach that you would expect from Mr. President now? And why do you think it's taken so much time for Mr. President to maybe address the Nigerian people directly?
This is just a panic reaction, because when the young people roll out the notices for the protest, the government, typical of its way of dealing with issues, disregarded it and thought it was merely just a joke. But from development in the country and development elsewhere in Africa, they got jittery and imagined that, look, these protests appear to have taken a unique dimension because of the determination of the young people to proceed with the planned nationwide protest. Therefore, they only now are crumbling and falling on each other, issuing all forms of threats, and assuming that that will definitely get somewhere. But to me, again, it's just mere their normal way of reacting to very serious issues. And I think that there is no sincerity of purpose in what the government is doing and the governors, because none of them make single reference to the demands of the youth. So I don't see it at all as communicating with Nigerians. And the best way I would have thought was for the president to have addressed the nation after engaging with young people. There are youth structures across the country. There is supposedly a ministry now of youth with 2 ministers there. There is also civil society organizations across the country. None of these stakeholders appear to have been engaged. There's some people that the protest is targeted at their attitude and conduct, are the same people coming out now to roll out threats against the protest. So it's sad that we are getting too close to the D-Day and government is just panicking. but I don't see anything that has been done.
And how do you say that we ensure that the effect, I mean, we're not quite over what happened in October of 2020 and the effects of what that protest led to, the turnout. We're not quite over the negative effects of that protest. We know of young people who were unfortunately killed, who lost their lives as a result of that protest. How do we ensure that we do not have a similar result, or we do not have a repetition of what happened in 2020 again, if these protests are to hold?
History is very, very significant because it helps to provide sufficient knowledge about how to deal with situations that are very similar. Therefore, what had happened during the NSAS would have been a positive indication to government that when you have the young people restless, agitated, and are pointing fingers at issues that affect them, you immediately engage them and try to listen to them. But completely there is at all no communication between the government and the young people. So if you are not talking about the fears of possible consequences of what turned out from previous experiences, you are just being hypocritical and insincere, because what happened in the past could have served as enough knowledge for you to deal with future problems. But the government learned nothing from it. Therefore, I think that from my monitoring, close monitoring, engagement, involvement with young people, especially with the current ongoing planned protest, the determination of the young people and the poor on this issue, I mean, the result is very, very high, because the factors driving it are existential. That is hunger, poverty, insecurity, corruption, injustice, and impunity. Now, government should have known that what happened at NSAS was an issue of injustice, a complaint about brutality. What have they done to basically curtail, engage, and ensure that positive steps were taken to have engaged young people and communicated properly the efforts of government, and they prefer to speak to the people of Nigeria and the young people through proxy means. This again indicated that we have learned nothing from what we are afraid of.
All right, former Minister, I want your thoughts also on, or your assessment rather, on the first year, plus of the current administration. How would you say that President Bola Tinubu has fared? And if you're going to rate his performance, from 1 to 10, how would you rate it? And also, will you be protesting, from the 1st of August?
Well, I will rate the government's performance in the last 1 year. If it's between 1 to 10, I would say 3. The government has only scored 3 over 10. Basically because the government had been more concerned about the deployment of propaganda as a communication, because the media aides of the president deploy more propaganda and then the attack dog strategy more than communication with Nigerians. So there is little or next to nothing about the achievement of the government, except maybe to congratulate the government for building the house of the vice president with about 21 billion, and then to congratulate the president for getting a new aircraft, and also congratulating the members of the National Assembly, for their new SUVs, which cost about 150 million. So those are basically some of the achievements. But for the poor, the need of the government is on the necks of the poor, and they are suffocating. And the government will need to allow the poor to breathe. And honestly, and as a patriot, saying this from the depth of my mind, that the people are suffocating and the people at least need some space to breathe. And the government should look towards that direction. Whether I will be protesting, yes, I am a comrade. I've spent 40 years of my life on the streets. I cannot ignore the fact that I'm living among the people. I'm speaking from my house in the center of the people in Jos. I live among the common people. So I'm conversant with what they go through. What I even receive daily in my house when people come to me to ask for basic needs of survival. And I have a connection with poor people across the country. Even yesterday, I received reports of people dying from one of the states where the governor had said nobody should come out to demonstrate because the security will deal with the person. About 30 people collapsed and died just as a result of hunger. So there need to be a bit humane in dealing with this issue. So I will identify with the people and deploy my experience to ensure that, the young people are guided to concentrate on their demand instead of allowing their focus to be distracted. And then we will have the problems which we are afraid of. Because if we are not involved to try to guide them, we should not come back and blame them for, driving the country into history.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is, will you be out protesting if there's a protest on the 1st?
Of course.
All right, that's what I want to confirm.
Nigerian, because I'm a Nigerian.
Yeah, absolutely. But another thing I want to ask, you were part of the previous administration. You served as minister in the previous administration. What would your response be to people who say that, the administration you served under is part of the major problems that Nigerians are dealing with today? It also mismanaged Nigeria. It, of course, started the trajectory to the current economic crisis that Nigeria is dealing with today. And so yourself and the administration you served under also is part of the failure.
Of course, over 2 years ago, I have come out openly and apologized to Nigerians that the Buhari administration failed to deliver on its mandate because we campaign on insecurity, fighting corruption, the economy, and addressing the issue of unemployment. And all these promises made to Nigerians were not made. So I admitted and apologized to Nigerians that we failed as a party and as a government under President Muhammadu Buhari, which I served. So, saying or blaming Buhari for what is happening now, is being insincere. President Bola Tinubu provided the vice president to Buhari, and he nominated about 7 ministers in that government, who some of them served for 4 years and some served for 8 years. So he doesn't have the moral high ground to blame Buhari because there is no distinction between Buhari's government and Tinubu government. It was a government that the Koto presided over. So the problems were created by Tinubu jointly from the beginning to where we are now. The Tinubu and the king that if his statement is that Buhari created the problem, he should take Nigerians back to 6 a.m. on the 29th of May. In fact, we will be much happier. Let him reverse this country back to 29th May 2023 at 6 a.m. We will be okay. Nigerians will not even demonstrate. It will reverse all back. So the blame game is untenable. It is lack of focus, leadership, and sincerity of purpose.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are going to be counting down the next few days. will determine the trajectory of how this nation goes regarding whether or not this protest will hold, and we look forward to having you join us for further conversations. Thank you for your time.
Yes, but with a very strong voice to everybody that is committed to the issue of the protest, that it is possible to achieve whatever your demands are with a peaceful protest. Because Mahatma Gandhi, the founder of peaceful protest in India, got independence for the Indian people through a peaceful protest.
Sir, we'll have to have you join us again. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I believe that we've gotten out the key parts of the conversation, and we look forward to having you join us again as we count down the days. Thank you for your time with us, sir. All right. African billionaire Aliko Dangote is being courted by Gabon's President Brice Oligui Nguema to invest in the country's cement and fertilizer industry. The invitation comes amidst a rift between Dangote and the Nigerian government over his refinery project. Dangote has faced challenges in Nigeria, including a dispute with oil marketers and government officials who claim his refinery is not yet licensed to operate.
Meanwhile, Gabon offers a new opportunity for Dangote to expand his business with potential benefits, including job creation and enhanced industrial capacity. The move highlights Gabon's efforts to attract foreign investment and diversify its economy. Joining us this morning is Global Affairs Analyst Ejike Okpa. Good morning, and thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. I mean, it may have started, as a very little rumor, but it seems to be actually materializing, which is, of course, the expansion of the Dangote industry, outside Nigeria. So I want to get your reactions, first of all, to the way things have been in the last 2 weeks, the controversy surrounding the refinery project, the seeming lack of support from the Nigerian government, and, of course, the criticism that the Nigerian government has received from Akiume Adesina, from Atiku Abubakar, from Peter Obi, and many others about their seeming lack of support for the refinery.
Well, what's going on with the Dangote refinery and steps in the years to this point shows you, there's something wrong with the project itself. When you want to do a refinery, the Dangote refinery is not owned by the Nigerian government. Dangote himself does not have access to the crude. I think even when this was announced, I said, okay, how is he going to get to the crude? What's called the feed system. Is it by pipeline, or is it, how is the crude? Because a refinery is just basically a chemical process where you take a barrel of something and you turn it into various products. So he still went ahead and did the refinery, and now he's running into the same thing. And that is, for those of us who are into project analysis, is coming back to hurt him. How was he going to get? The Nigerian government said, okay, we're going to supply you this crude at a discount so that you can refine and sell it back to us, or are you going to buy the crude at the open market rate? But he still went ahead and built the refinery, and now he's stuck. You don't do that. If you go around the world, you see those who do refinery always have access to the crude. And he didn't have that as an agreement in place. I guess he felt, okay, I'm going to do it, and after the fact, and then the after the fact is what is harming him. Whether everybody else is saying Nigeria should support him, the first thing should have been done first. And then what you see with the Dangote is Dangote over the years has become a beneficiary of undue government support, which again is an antitrust and a monopolistic position that has given him advantages over everybody else. So sooner or later, he's going to run into a problem. And that's what the problem is now. He's trying to figure out, what do I do? I build this massive investment, borrowed money, or had other people invest in it. Now I don't know what to do. He doesn't have a license. It gives you something to pause. Gives you who was behind it. Who was encouraging him. And now, Angola or Gabon is inviting him again as a government. Dangote is a master at dealing with government. He has never won any request for proposal. If competition were to be open, I don't think Dangote would be one winning it. So he has undue advantage, and undue advantage in business oftentimes turns around to hurt the person because it's antitrust. If you go back to America when the Rockefellers controlled the oil industry, the Congress had to come back and tell them you have to break it up. That's why you have Chevron and Mobil and every other thing that came out of that. Dangote, sooner or later, is going to be faced with that because he has benefited unduly from government patronage. And people are watching. People are going to, speak up, and then that speak up is what we are seeing some of it now.
Okay, so are you saying that all that is happening currently, all that he has been speaking about, that is maybe rightful because he has benefited unduly from the government, and if you say that he's benefited unduly from the government, what does that say about the government then? In that case, what does that say about the government and its support for other businesses and maybe for competition?
Well, what it says is that the government is also part of this whole monopolistic stuff. And the Nigerian government is notorious. They are ready to stifle one business, in support of another. And again, when Dangote started just being a commodity supplier, sugar, rice, and cement, and all of that, everybody else who was in that business was stifled just to support Dangote. And people may not openly speak about it, but internally they're going to be trying to find ways to undermine him, because again, Dangote ego, look at how he has done the things he's done it because of government support. When I went to Obasanjo Presidential Library, I found out Dangote was the biggest, supporter of that. So what does that tell you? If you go back, so it was during Obasanjo that Dangote started to surface the way he has surfaced. Because again, Ibeto was in the cement industry, so many other things, but they were stifled just to support Dangote. And again, it's one of those things is, sooner or later, somebody's going to find a way to hunt him, and they're hunting him, and they're hurting him. And he doesn't know how to compete. He doesn't know how to be fair. He's running around, and government are inviting him. And again, good businessmen are, competition is good for business, because that's what is going to see who is better and who is good and who is going to survive the challenges. So I'm not wishing him bad. I'm just saying, hey, the chicken has come home to roast, and let's see whether he can handle the heat.
Well, we'll see how things turn out, but, one thing that has been made clear, is the criticism from the current administration, and of course the call for them to, regardless of whatever, emotions that they have towards Dangote and his past dealings with previous governments, they should support, this current project because it will benefit the country somehow, some way. But I also want to ask, he did, make mention, maybe in a subtle way lay some allegations that top members and top executives of the Nigerian government and of the NNPC have refinery investments in other countries like Malta. They, of course, have not been able to confirm or deny that. But, what do you think about that particular allegation? And is there a possibility that that is maybe one of the reasons that we've not been able to see proper development of Nigeria's own refineries?
But one thing that is common in Nigeria is allegations are made and nobody actually comes back to say, here is the proof. Crude is not air. If you're going to refine crude in another country, you should be able to go to that country and trace what type of crude. Remember, refineries are not just built for the sake of building them. You build them specifically for the type of crude. And Nigerian crude is specific, it's just light burning crude. So there are refineries that are built for that. If you say there are Nigerian crude is being refined in Malta, that's a no-brainer. Just trace it, go to Malta, ask the question, where are the crude coming from? And then oftentimes, there's this open request for information. File it. And then sometimes that's why I said the Nigerian Bar Association is just a bar association, bar in the sense of they are just a bunch of drunkards there. Nigerian Bar Association should have a public integrity committee. And the public integrity committee is anytime something is affecting Nigerian overall economically, they should, with their legal knowledge, both internally and international, reach out and say, can you guys verify this on behalf of Nigeria? Or they file a compelling lawsuit against the country or the facility that is outside and said, address this allegation, but they haven't done it. Then you have the signs, the senior advocates of Nigeria, who by now should be legal minds who have risen beyond just to go into court to deal with issues on behalf of Nigeria. So there are ways you can address allegations so that you give people the confidence and then also the ability to trust what is coming out. But they just say it and it goes away. And then you fuel this rumor, you fuel this unnecessary reaction. And that is not good for a country as big as Nigeria. Nigeria is 200 million people. There's so much emphasis on oil, but how much oil does Nigeria really produce? Less than 3 million barrels a day. And the economics behind oil is not a very sophisticated thing. It's how many barrels produced times how much you sell it. That economy, anybody can do it. It's just a multiplication factor. So by now, oil is creating a huge excitement for Nigeria when other sectors are being stifled. So, but it's being stifled because Nigerians are not getting good information about what their economic capabilities are. Everybody wants to be in the oil business. I live in Texas. Texas produces 5 to 6 million barrels of oil a day. And we don't even celebrate people who work in the oil industry in Texas. Because at the end of the day, the way Texas state makes money is through taxes. So we're not invested in the physical structure that produces the oil. We just, wait for you to produce it and we just, get our tax money and we move on. But Nigeria is actually selling and producing, and then it creates excitement because Nigeria is the major oil producer. Yeah, you're a major oil producer, but look at how many people you have to feed. Any country that has their population in triple digits don't rely on commodity to survive. Nigeria has relied on commodity sales, and they have not done stronger economic policies and programs to attract attention, foreign direct investment into the other sector. Everyone talks about oil and oil and oil. Almost like, what is this oil thing? Kuwait produces the same amount of barrels with 400 and something thousand Kuwaitis. Qatar, and Nigeria with 200 million. So how are you going to compete? So, people in Qatar can just sell 2 billion barrels of oil and write a check for $10,000 to everybody that is a Qataris. But Nigeria can afford it. Nigeria is the poorest oil-producing country of the OPEC member nations. Go look at it. You look at how many produced times how many people that you're going to feed, and you see where Nigeria is on that scale. It's the poorest country of all oil-producing countries because of the size of the population.
All right. So now, as there are conversations about Dangote potentially having conversations, setting up shop in Gabon, what are your thoughts about, how he might be able to fare? You say that he's benefited unduly from the Nigerian government. Do you think that Gabon will be a fair playing ground for his business? How do you see this proceeding?
Well, again, it's another government invitation. It's not like the government of Gabon issued a request for proposal, what we call RFP. If RFP were to be issued by Gabon, they said, okay, we're looking for companies to come in here and do X, Y, Z for us, and then they go through all that whole process of review, capacity statement, and they pick Dangote, then that should be something to celebrate. But now they're inviting him. Who knows? Again, that's what I said. Dangote is in bed with government, and that gives him the monopolistic advantages and gives him all that undue advantages that he exploits and uses to say, hey, I'm a businessman. Dangote is not a sophisticated businessman. If you look at all the stock associated with companies owned by Dangote, none of them is worth $1 a share equivalent. You go look at it. So here is the richest black man or the richest Nigerian, and on a global scale, your company, none of the companies associated with you is listed on any major stock exchange. And then when you list them in Nigeria, you are selling them at 400 or something naira per share. And 400 and something naira per share divided by the exchange rate of 1,500 to $1, that means like 25 cents. That tells you right there, that's not somebody you want to go put money. Like America said, I'm putting my money, I'm putting my bet on you. So Dangote has not achieved the level. By now, the richest black man in the world or the richest Nigeria should be like Warren Buffett. If you want to buy, Berkshire shares, you're talking about, almost $10,000 a share. But here we are, the richest black man with all the cement and everything associated with him. But now Dangote should be a brand. That means you don't have to like the man. You like what he's doing and you invest in his company. And if he doesn't do well through this, stock purchases, you can buy him and kick him out. But you can't, because he is not performing. His stocks are not performing. They may be performing for the average Nigerian, but on a global scale, nobody places bets on Dangote because of the way he has achieved his success, and that achievement is through antitrust and monopoly, and the world frowns at monopoly. Maybe back in the early 1900s it worked, but right now, no. In America, if such a thing were to happen, there would be lawsuits, against all those things, and their thing would have collapsed. So Dangote should be a competitive businessman, win fair and square, and not deal with government where you get an undue advantage.
But is that his fault? Can we say that is really Dangote's fault as much as it's the government? If there really is, if we can categorically say...
It is his fault.
Okay.
It is his fault.
How is it his fault?
It is his fault because of the way, you know about eBay. Ibeto is another guy who was in the cement industry and importing stuff, and so many other Nigerians. And Dangote is known to have gone after the sources or gone to the government to say, hey, stifle these people so that I can get an undue advantage. That is his fault. Tell me any business Dangote has won on an open and fair competition. Tell me, is it importing rice or sugar or cement? Tell me. And tell me if the government put out a request for proposal. That is, when the government puts out a request for proposal, that means everybody responded. And we review it and we make an award.
The claims about stifling Ibeto's business, has, been a popular, I would call it a rumor. But do we have any facts
yes,
that Dangote actually...
Of course, I met Ibeto. Let me tell you, I don't talk about facts. I'm not a beer parlor guy.
All right.
When I say something, I can back it up with information. I met Ibeto in Dallas, and this was back when Obasanjo was in office. And I said, Mr. Ibeto, I'm not saying this because he's Igbo and Igbo. I don't have any personal relationship with him. But when he brought that up, I said, Mr. Ibeto, this is how you can go about that issue. And he looked at me and said, what do you mean? I said, this is how you can go about it, at least to get a fair hearing and see what happens. And he said, educate, look, in Nigeria, things don't work that way. I said, well, then deal with it. And that dealing with it is he's out of business. He's stifled. And that goes back to the same thing I was telling you. Obasanjo was the head of, the president at the time, and Obasanjo was, favored Dangote. If you doubt me, make a trip to the Obasanjo Presidential Library in Abeokuta and go and see the people that made the donation for the building of the library.
What about Lafarge? What about BUA?
Lafarge was already in the business before he came in, and we don't have such claims against Lafarge.
Yeah, again, because he's been in business before him doesn't really mean anything. It is who is the favored guy, who is our favorite, who knows how to go behind the scenes and cut a deal. I'm just saying, hey, I give it to him. He's been able to eliminate a whole lot of competition. But when you do that, always remember, he who has the last laugh has the best one. Maybe, his sunshine is about to dim. Maybe people are beginning to wake up and say, why have we rewarded this particular individual for what he has done? Does it mean that we are not good enough? I don't know. Maybe he will still survive it, but Dangote is under a great heat. If the refinery that he has touted to be the best and the biggest done in Africa, it doesn't even have a license. Anybody who is a student of economic analysis or business analysis will say, well, how did he get here? Why would you go ahead and build a refinery? Now, you tell me, is there a pipeline that is dedicated to supply? Dangote does not own Nigerian crude. And if you're going to refine, in Texas, we have ExxonMobil refinery, which is the biggest in America. ExxonMobil produces their oil and they send it directly. And other refiners supply ExxonMobil refinery, because it's not something you just do. Refinery is not like your filter system. It's a very complicated process based on the type of crude. So ExxonMobil is not going to come back and say, oh, we don't have crude to refine, because they own the feeder system. And the feeder system is what? The crude itself. So anybody who is going to approve you for refinery, just like power plant, if you were to build a power plant in Texas, you know, the first question they will ask you, what is your source of water to cool down that power plant? If you can't show the source of water, they're not going to give you approval. So how was Dangote able to get to build the refinery when he has not secured the supply route? He said he was going to bring it by batch. You know, you don't bring
just to clarify, you're implying that the whole business history of Aliko Dangote has been mostly supported by his relationship with the Nigerian government, not necessarily because he is a shrewd and a proper businessman who was understood the Nigerian economy and the Nigerian business space well enough to become who he is today. And remember, it's not just cement and crude now. There's, of course, his investments in FMCGs, there's sugar, there's spaghetti, there's many other things. Are you saying, that his whole career history is mostly because of the support of the Nigerian government?
I'm not telling you what you don't already imagine. It's just that maybe you will not say it the way I'm saying it. What I'm telling you is, you go look at every sector of the business that Dangote has claimed or dominated. How did he get there? Maybe as a small-time businessman at the time he was doing it, but when he got to, remember the word shrewd doesn't mean you have done everything right. Shrewd can also mean that you know how to undercut everybody else. Shrewd also means that you are mean. You can go behind the scene and yak off their head. So my point is, you tell me, when all this other sector that Dangote has excelled, did Nigerian government issue a request for proposal or a request for information, and they entertained everybody and they reviewed it and they said, okay, now you're the winner? That is what they call fair competition in business. But when you are just single-handedly selecting somebody to reward them to do certain things, it's antitrust. You go look up the word antitrust or monopoly. Monopoly is the old word for it, but in today's market it's called antitrust or inside trading. Inside trading in America, a lot of people have gone to jail because now you get information other people wouldn't have gotten and you are using it to your advantage. That's called inside trading. But when you are just being selected because the head of state or somebody who has power say you are the man without considering everybody else, then it's antitrust.
All right.
So all of those things have applied it to Dangote. And again, I'm not saying this because, I don't like the man, I like the man. I could care one way or the other. But my point is, when I look at the stocks associated with the richest black men in the world, we can find out that none of them is trading above $1 a share.
All right, Mr.
If you were to write your people, I'm sorry.
No, we need to wrap the conversation up. I look forward to speaking with you again, and I think the next conversation I would like to have with you is knowing whether you feel Donald Trump and J.D. Vance will self-implode, because those are the signs that I see currently. They might just implode on themselves, but we'll see. Looking forward to more conversations with you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Hey, the world is full of intrigues. That's why we are here to look at them and give our own views. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Welcome back, and now let's take you through the newspapers this morning, share with you the major stories making headlines across Nigeria. We're going to be kicking off on the Punch newspapers, I believe, and it should be on your screen in a bit. Yes, it says that Tinubu rallies NSA, monarchs as hunger protest looms. President meets with APC governors, Ooni, Sultan, clerics as planned protest gains momentum. Opposition charges Tinubu to address Nigerians. Army, DSS alleged plot to force regime change. We can also see on the Punch this morning, top of your screen there, it's a very sad story. I think it's not very long ago, the previous Ohaneze leader also passed. Don't remember his name now. And of course, now we're seeing another similar incident. So very sad story. The president and governors mourn as Ohaneze leader Iwanyanwu dies. Probe, National Assembly summons NNPC and Dangote over $10 billion oil theft. Interesting. Tinubu may sign 70,000 naira minimum wage bill next week. And also 16 state-owned schools get student loan approval. At the bottom of the Punch this morning, factional kingmakers oppose fresh Alafin selection process. Police station rape, NGOs condemn pace of investigation. And Lagos begins probe as 5 are killed in building collapse. Those are the stories on the Punch.
All right, now let's move away from the Punch newspaper to the next paper. But before that, before we get into the details of the story, just to mention that when we're done, we'll discuss some of them and have you call and be a part of the conversation. The Daily Independent newspaper big story is, we've identified sponsors of planned nationwide protests, says DSS. No to protest that leads to destruction of lives and property, says Tinubu. Military intelligence envisages it may lead to anarchy, says DMO director. Says protesters targeting worship centers, markets, critical assets, others. MBF warns against sponsoring pro-government protesters to cause anarchy. Senate assures on exposing economic saboteurs in petroleum sector. NSA tasks governors on growing momentum over planned protest. Aircraft wet leasing dragging down Nigeria's aviation growth. Tinubu, Mba, Soludo, Ohaneze Ndigbo, Mon, Iwanyanwu. INEC has capacity to conduct local government elections, says Yakubu. Police Green Initiative will boost capacity to maintain law and order, says Tinubu. At the top of the paper we have, federal government decision to float Naira, reason for economic hardship, says TUC. And SGF says federal government spent $1.5 billion to protect oil installation in 4 years.
All right, and now moving from the Daily Independent, let's see what First News has for us. Nation on high alert as protest tensions escalate. Security forces issue stern warnings against planned unrest. Military warns protests could spark Kenya-like anarchy. DSS, sponsors of protests identified, aiming to topple Tinubu's government. Tinubu holds emergency meeting with Sultan, Ooni, NSA, IGP, APC governors and others. Traditional rulers urge patience after meeting with the president. Also, Senate invites Dangote, NNPCL, CBN, Nimasa, and others over alleged economic sabotage. And sadly, once again, Ohaneze Ndigbo President Iwanyanwu dies. President Tinubu says, I protested, but always non-violently. And at the bottom of the screen there, you can also see Ezekwesili to Tinubu's government use planned protests to engage dissatisfied citizens. Building collapse in Lagos kills 5 again. I'm going to start with the top of the Punch, not the Punch, now the First News newspaper, which says, I protested, but always non-violently, says President Tinubu. And also the story that says sponsors of protests identified aiming to topple Tinubu's government. And I'm saying, I'm starting with that because it feels like there is a script that is written you know, in our top security agencies and passed around every single time that there is a seeming disgruntled citizenry across Nigeria. It's the same script that plays out every time. You know, they allege that it's going to be violent. They start talking about anarchy, start talking about, you know, toppling the government and all of that. Then there's never really any evidence that there's anything like that. They never show you any evidence that, oh, this protest actually was a plan to topple the government. They said the same thing during Buhari's administration, during the NSAS protest. And I think President Muhammadu Buhari even said it by himself, that the people were heading for Aso Rock to, you know, remove him from Aso Rock. It is always the same way that they paint protests. No matter how peaceful the protest wants to be, or, you know, says that it will be, or protesters say that it will be, they immediately say it's going to be, you know, chaos and violent. And right now, it feels like they themselves are preempting violence. They haven't seen any evidence. They haven't shown any evidence that it's meant to be a violent protest, going to be creating chaos and anything. But they are already preempting it. They're already telling you that it's going to be violent. And I don't know that that is the right way, because I feel like a lot of Nigerians have already seen that we know that's what you're going to say. We know that's the approach that you're going to have. Right. I said it earlier that President Tinubu still has not realized that the approach and the stance, the way of governance that former President Muhammadu Buhari had is not the way that he should do things. The former president barely spoke to Nigerians, barely addressed the people, barely had media. In fact, he didn't have. The only times that he had his media chat was maybe prior to 2019 elections or something, when there was an election coming up. But there was never any time when the president said to himself, let's discuss with the people. It was only maybe on Democracy Day and some of all of that you can say, okay, that he speaks with the Nigerian people. And that is mostly a pre-recorded conversation that he shares with the people. So the current administration is doing the same thing, which is become president, step 1. Step 2, get into Aso Rock. Step 3, completely ignore media. Every now and then we see, Joe Biden. The reason we even see that Joe Biden's health has failed is because he's out there. Because you see that he's speaking with the press, because you see that he's addressing a crowd of supporters, because you see that he's approaching his presidential helicopter and there's a press person, with a microphone in his face. That's the reason we can tell that Joe Biden was not fit.
So I think that over the course of the years, we in Nigeria have also not, maybe we haven't held our leaders to account enough, because in previous administrations, there barely were presidential debates. Presidential debates will happen, and if you notice, the actual presidential candidate or the actual winner, the person who eventually becomes president, never even participated in the presidential debate.
But that is not... So I would always ask that Nigerians, demand accountability from their leaders, no doubt. But that has to be in a country that the president, the leaders, understand the power of the people and understand that if the people say we want you to be accountable, you must be accountable. Absolutely. Not in a situation where the people say we want to protest peacefully. You're having the army, you're having DSS, you're having traditional rulers, you're having governors immediately tell them that it's going to be violent and it's going to be a violent process. You're trying to remove the president.
Potential traditional festivals that will come up as
exactly.
well. And it just feels, and what that makes the young Nigerians who want to protest feel like is that you're not listening to us and you will do anything to silence us, to counter us. Because like we mentioned earlier, protesting is a right that is guaranteed by the Constitution. They're allowed to peacefully protest. What is not allowed is when it then becomes violent. However, we saw how the 2020 protests went. Nigerian youth, for the first time in a long time, came together and worked with one voice. But of course, there would always be the people who will then go in their midst and try to thwart what was, what had a good motive or a good vision. It wasn't a violent protest. But there are accusations that it was even the government in a way that manipulated. There had been accusations of the government manipulating, using thugs and weapons to sort of infiltrate the protest, and then they would then say that, we have a reason to disband the protest
and it's the same language that we're hearing today.
Now, just to mention to our audience watching us, regardless of wherever you're watching from, that if you'd like to be a part of the conversation, even as we review the papers this morning, the numbers to call are on your TV screen. So please remember, if you'd like to react to any of the conversations or any of the stories on the front pages of the papers, call the number on your TV screen. We're currently talking about the protest and how the federal government has handled the protests. So are you team protest, or you're not in support of the protest? Do you think it should happen? Or do you think that the way that the government is going about it is not the way to go about it? Now, just to mention, whilst you were speaking, you talked about us being a country that it would be great if we're a country that could hold its government to account, where the citizens actually have the power. Knowing that, in a way, not your exact words, but when the country sees, or when the citizen sneeze, the government catches a cold. In Kenya, and I'm going to reference Kenya because that's the most recent example that we've had of a protest that has in some measure generated the desired result. They all wanted to speak. Part of the demands that they gave to the president was that he addresses the nation. And we saw that eventually a Twitter space or a space on X was held where he was able to speak to the citizens at large. I don't know if that can actually happen here. Because sometimes all you need is just an avenue to feel heard, to feel listened to. And that can only happen when the government realizes that it honors the commitment to serve that it has made to the people. And, why are we not having occasional town hall meetings? We had the ministerial update, which many people would say that, hasn't yielded as much impact as it should have. Were there any people that were fired because we feel that they were underperforming? It's just a myriad of scenarios.
I know that nobody expects that President Bola Tinubu would hold a Twitter space with Nigerians. No one expects it.
Media chats.
No one also is expecting that there will be a media chat. It will be great that he does it. I also do not know how effective it would be because, like I asked yesterday, what is the new thing that the government will like to say to Nigerians that would calm people's nerves that they haven't said in the last 1 year? Because they've had an opportunity to have these conversations with Nigerians in the last 1 year. They've had many opportunities through their spokespersons, through even the governors, through the National Assembly, through Mr. President himself, to express, their plans to the average Nigerian person and also to convince the average Nigerian why you should, just be patient, as they've always said. And so if they've not been able to communicate that in the last year, I don't know what they're going to say on the Twitter space that will change the minds of Nigerians. And here's why. They have communicated, but it seems like a lot of Nigerians do not buy what they are saying.
Right.
And I've said that before.
Let's hear from Somi calling from Uyo. Good morning. Thanks for calling.
Good morning.
Okay, you're calling from Ogun State. Please go ahead with your conversation or your contribution.
It's all about this ado, in respect of the...
We don't seem to be able to hear you here.
Hello? Hello?
All right.
While we wait for him to... Please, yeah. Sonny, go ahead if you can hear us.
Yeah. It's all about the
okay.
All right, call us back.
Please call us back. I want to be a part of the conversation. To turn down the volume of your TV screen or your TV set, if you don't, it would interfere with the conversation and we'll have to disconnect the call. But please call back. We'd like to hear what you have to say.
I was saying, the challenge here is, it's not because they haven't spoken. They have been speaking, but Nigerians don't seem to be buying what they're saying. I've given, the narrative of a particular advert, that a company wanted to sell dog feed. That's what they produce. That's their product. So they had this new product and they were, they put it out in the market. It wasn't moving. Nobody was buying it. And so they brought in, different analysts and different media agencies and different type of marketing agencies to help them market the product. And they tried and tried and tried for months. Nothing seemed to be working. Nobody, consumers didn't seem to be, buying the product. And so the general manager of this company calls a big meeting, brings all the marketing agencies that they've used and all of that, try to figure out what is wrong. And from the back of the room, while they were discussing, an intern said, Mr. CEO, I understand that you have these, agencies and these, biggest brains in marketing here to just, to try to, understand why this product is not moving. But what if the dogs just don't like the product? And that's exactly what we seem to be playing out in Nigeria. That you may have communicated, you have said, this or that, you've, given out rice, and trailers of rice, you've given out palliatives, you've told Nigerians how, you need to remove subsidy because there are people stealing Nigeria's commonwealth and all of that. But unfortunately, Nigerians just don't seem to be buying that narrative anymore.
All right, let's hear from Matthew calling from Benue State. Good morning, Matthew. Thanks for calling. Matthew, are you there with us? Okay, can you please speak up?
I just want to make my contribution to the planned protest.
How does it make your contribution? Oops. Okay.
It is the civil rights of the citizens to go on streets and do their protest.
All right.
Because they must hold the government accountable for what they are doing. Democracy is all about the people. Just that not everybody will hold the political office at the same time, so they just elect people who will represent them in the offices. And when these people are not doing well, we have to call them to order. This is where you have done wrong, this is where you have done wrong. So there's nothing wrong with the planned protest. This is the only way the vulnerable and the less privileged can echo their voices in the nation, that the people in hierarchy will listen to them. So if they are turning around to block this way, they are just marginalizing the people and they are counting the people as not part of the government. So it is very, very bad. And this will go a long way to kill the emotions and the future of the young people. They will feel rejected and dejected in this nation. So this protest is highly welcomed. It should go on, and the government should listen to the people and do the demands of the people.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for you calling. I should also quickly mention, how telling it is that we're just 1 year, a couple of months after the inauguration of this government, and we are already talking about a protest. And that tells you how quickly the trust deficit, depleted with the current administration. Mostly because of their actions, the things that they did compared to the things that they said. the 21 billion naira for the vice president's residence, the billions of naira that were, allocated for cars for National Assembly members, the billions of naira that were given for a presidential yacht, for the presidential jet, the idea of removing subsidy, yet we're still talking about paying 700 billion naira for subsidy every month. And of course, the lack of clarity with that. And the fact that everybody can see that we're still paying subsidy, but nobody seems to be talking about it. The National Assembly just ignores it like it's not a big elephant in the room. That we are actually still paying subsidy from what it looks like. The landing cost of petrol is obviously, completely different from what we're paying for petrol right now at fuel stations. And so when you have all these little things here and there, and then at the same time you tell Nigerians to be patient, Nigeria is a work in progress, you can't, be so agitated after 1 year, it doesn't work. The Buhari administration, when he came to office, a lot of people had their doubts, but what happened is, he took, 5-6 months before he set up his cabinet, right? And that was one of the first red flags that Nigerians saw. But at least they gave him 1 year, 2 years to say, okay, maybe he still has proper plans. But this is just 1 year?
Well, let's hear from Benson calling from Nasarawa. Good morning, Benson. Thanks for calling.
Good morning.
Yeah, Benson, please go ahead.
Please, I just want to contribute to the current discussion.
Okay, the audio is a bit low, Benson. We're struggling to hear you.
I want to contribute.
All right, please
go ahead. Please.
My problem with our security agents is that if there is a protest, and there are some people who want to plan against the protest, must you be telling people they are not behaving as if they are professional? On that protest day, you go to the street, then you guide those who are protesting, and anybody who wants to hijack the protest for any ulterior motive, you arrest them. You don't need to be telling us that there will be protests, and there will be violence. Who is telling them there will be violence? We are all Nigerians. If the government, the government is doing the right thing, will people go to the street and be protesting? So the government should address the issue of the nation. They should make sure that they ameliorate the hardship of the Nigerian people, not protecting them from going to the street to protest. Yeah. It is not professional for DSS to say we are known them. If we are known them, go and arrest them now. You don't need to be telling the public. Right. And you don't need to be saying the fact that people who protest, there will be violence. You are talking to traditional, we are talking to this. Let people go and exercise their civic responsibility. That is my contribution.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Still speaking about the
really good point that he's made.
Yes, very. The Daily Independence front page says, we've identified sponsors of planned nationwide protests according to the DSS. And, one wonders what the meaning of this is. They've identified who the sponsors are, what is going to be done about it. What do they mean by, sponsors of planned protests? Is this not, I would think that this is just one of the protests that is basically born out of the fact that people are hungry, people are tired, people are demanding for a better government, right? But if you've come to announce publicly that you've identified sponsors of planned protests.
Okay, well, arrest them.
So what next?
And wait for the first.
Yeah.
And that's what you should do.
Charges.
It's the same thing, with what Benson just said. If you know people that, or you fear that it would be scuttled, there will be violence, that people, your role there.
You know that they are sponsoring violence.
Yes. Your role, no. Even separate from the ones who are sponsoring protests. Let's assume that the security agencies actually know that it will be marred with violence. There are people that are going to hijack the protests and all of that. Okay. Your role is to arrest those people who want to hijack a peaceful protest. Your role is not to tell people to not protest. And I'm sure that they know these things. It's just because a lot of abnormalities have been normalized in Nigeria, and so the police will be telling you that, oh, you shouldn't protest because it will be hijacked. No, but that's your responsibility. Your responsibility is to ensure that people who have a right to protest, I beg your pardon, are protected.
Right.
So if you have information about people who are trying to hijack the protest, arrest them. And bear in mind that everybody who has spoken about the protest, if you look across social media, most people who have spoken about protests have spoken about it peacefully. The only persons who have spoken about attacking
are the ones who are speaking against.
Yes.
It. Let's hear from Tony Eze calling. Good morning, Tony Eze. Thanks for calling. Please go ahead.
Good morning.
All right. Please go ahead with your conversation. Good morning.
I want to thank you people because I'm happy with this station. It's one of the best stations in the country so far.
Thank you very much.
More grace to your elbow.
Thank you very much, Tony. All right.
What baffles me is that people are not telling the people that are in the authority the truth. I watched the traditional rulers gathering in Aso Rock, and I don't think any one of them told our president truth. They came out with a smile, all of them, when the press was interviewing them outside, with a smile. And these are the people that are supposed to take president. This and these are the things that are on the ground. This is what we want you to do. And that is why we come to Abuja. And they are the people, in fact, the people that are supposed to be our mouth speak, they are not speaking. And that is the simple truth. Now, about the security personnel, if they want the protest to be peaceful, it will be peaceful. And if they say there are people that are going to cause problem, what is leading them from arresting those people and then let those people that want to cause problem face the prosecution? If you get any information that is clear and they have evidence to it, why not take those people to court and allow people to do the right thing that they're supposed to do?
All right. Thanks a lot.
The truth of the matter is that Nigerians are not happy. And we are expecting our leader, especially president, to speak to the youth. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your comment.
The reason you have the possibility of 100 people, maybe 1,000, maybe 1 million people willing to join you to protest, if there truly are sponsors of a protest, the reason that you have 1,000 people willing to be a part of that process is because you have 1,000 disgruntled people, not because you have 1,000 deceived people. So the idea of sponsors of a protest, it means that, you know, these people are deceiving millions of Nigerians that the president is not doing well. And so because millions of Nigerians have been deceived, they will come out and protest against Mr. President's government. That's the idea. But the availability of that 1 million people or 2 million people or 1,000 people shows that you have 2 million or 1 million disgruntled people who truly are angry. But if they've been deceived, it's left for you as the government to convince them otherwise.
Right.
It's not left for you as the government to threaten them. You should be able to convince them that if this person has told you that if there are people sponsoring the process and trying to disrupt the government, and these people are simply deceiving millions of Nigerians,
right,
or convince them otherwise. That's what you should do.
Now, we know there are many stories we've looked at, but we've had a whole conversation on the protest. But as we're wrapping up, police station, rape, NGOs condemn pace of investigation. Just to mention that there is still an investigation being conducted of a 17-year-old girl who went to a police station to report the case of her phone being stolen and was raped by a police officer, or allegedly raped by a police officer. The investigation is still being conducted, and we will keep talking about it until we get results. We're hoping to get feedback from the police spokesperson regarding this, and that this policeman is not shielded.
A building under construction in the Maryland area of Lagos collapsed yesterday, killing 5 persons. Lagos State Emergency Management Agency LASEMA boss Olufemi Damilola Oke Osaintolu confirmed that 5 persons, all adult males, were rescued alive from the building collapse site. Building collapses have reoccurred in Lagos in the last few weeks. Earlier in July, 7 persons were rescued when a 2-story building collapsed in the Mushin area of the state. 10 others were also rescued, when a building caved in the Saleko area of the state in May.
Well, that's unfortunate. They were seeing the footage from that story, the building collapse. We're seeing that 5 unfortunately have been dead or have been declared dead. It's unfortunate that we still have this kind of conversations. Whilst we hope that this will be the last, many would say that there are no guarantees, you know, that this would be the last going forward. But we're going to be looking into the details of this conversation and seeing how we can avoid situations like this from repeating themselves again or repeating itself again, and also how we can ensure that punitive measures can be employed for the ones that have already happened.
Absolutely. And this morning we have joining us Mr. Akin Bashiru, who's an APC chieftain here in Lagos. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Great to have you. It seems a lot of the buildings in Lagos are tired.
They're either tired or the government is retiring them. So it's like
one of them. But you know, it's sad mostly because of the loss of lives that happen here, and one thing I've always pointed out, and I've always questioned is the ability of LASEMA and every agency to have proper rescue equipment and save lives. That maybe could have been saved. So let's first get your thoughts on this recent collapse. It seems to be happening a lot in Lagos. Why do you think that is?
Anyway, in the first place, one would like to sympathize with those who have lost their lives, in the cause of the collapse. But let me also say that building collapse is not peculiar to Lagos. Perhaps because Lagos is highly populated and the number of buildings you have in Lagos are quite enormous. Like you said, that a lot of people may say perhaps this is the last, but there's nobody who can guarantee. I mean, that's a matter of fact. And why? Because most of these buildings you're talking about are not buildings that are just being constructed today. A lot of them have been there over the years, and some of these buildings that are collapsing are buildings, I guess, must have suffered from various factors, some of which are poor quality of jobs, lack of the relevant expertise of those who take responsibility for constructing some of these buildings. You would have observed that there's this agency, is it LAPSCA now? Yes, I think LAPSCA, and is it Bola Tinubu? You will see that they are upping the ante in terms of monitoring, in terms of identification of buildings that are seen to be distressed. But you see, the challenge you have in this climb is that where you identify those buildings, Nigerians have a way of trying to circumvent, pulling the strings here and there, until the last minute when the building collapses. But I think that where buildings are identified, I think the first thing is to call for evacuation. But even where you mark the building, has been weak, you still see people still struggling to continue to do business there until the last minute. I think that whenever buildings are identified as weak, immediately compliance must be stressed. Immediately evacuation must be addressed. And of course, I am a strong advocate of compliance. I'm a strong advocate of penalty when there are offenses committed. So I believe strongly that where we are strong, in enforcing penalties, and these enforcements are made clear, are made public for people to see as examples, I'm sure it will help in the long run. I
mean, you just highlighted a challenge that we have because we don't have strong systems and structures that ensure that people who are found guilty are punished. What we do here sometimes is the building has collapsed, the developers have fled, and then we don't hear about it again until the next building collapse, and everybody's wondering what happened to the previous ones. So how do you suggest that we can maybe put stronger infrastructure to ensure that there are punitive measures for when a building collapses, that people will know that if you're going into this real estate business, you have to really know your onions. If you use substandard products and substandard materials, which unfortunately we might start to see a lot of that with the rising cost in building materials, the cost of cement is increasing. So how do we ensure that we put systems and structures that guarantee that people know if they err, they will be punished?
I do not want to think that the cost of materials would be any reason for, changing, the structural process that must be undertaken when you're talking about building. Even in the past, where materials have been cheap, people have always looked for one way or the other to shortchange the system. But like we're agreeing here, penalty, enforcement, compliance are critical. I will suggest that our political office holders, professionals, in the industry, professional organizations must have a strict, strong, integrated system through which, corporates are penalized. But like I said, we have not been used to such approach here. Rather, we have given we've given processes to the element of emotion, element of sentiment, element of I know you, you know me. You understand? I think that's been a big problem. I think our leaders, political office holders, institutions must be courageous enough, must be bold enough to take the bull by the horn. Let them start with an example. And I think, yeah, every other person, you know, would take, would take the right and proper attitude towards, you know, getting this done. And I think professional organizations should equally have a way of sanctioning fake professionals or professionals that engage the services of people who normally would not qualify to undertake any aspect of, you know, construction, engineering, and building process.
In what ways, you know, if any, would you criticize the Lagos State Building Control Agency?
I'm not sure that I'm going to criticize them, you know, but let me, like I first said earlier, I know they're doing a lot because I am a person who shows a lot of interest in activities, you know, going on around me. But at the same time, don't forget that that LABCA is also an agency of government that also has its own processes, its own checks and balances. You know, you equally have organizations under which they are equally, you know, monitored. Do you get that? So even if LABCA as an agency is up and doing, I think as they are, I think there are other factors, external factors, maybe beyond even their own reach, that may not make them to be 100% effective as we will expect. But I think that the consciousness is becoming higher because the recurrence is equally not something we are all happy about. So naturally, this I think should serve as an impetus for the government and of course, you know, the officials who are directly involved in the control of buildings, that is LABCA, to be able to do more. Raise alarm when there is, insist on, you know, carrying out their duties. And yes,
is there a possibility that in the course of monitoring the buildings of this, the process of buildings being erected, that it can be monitored not just when the permits and the right approvals are given, when the land is being, when the land has been paid for and the C of O, but also through the building process? Because we've heard of situations where people get approval to build maybe one floor, one story, and then end up going to build up 4. So is there systems, do we currently have systems that ensure that it can be monitored on the go whilst, you know, maybe months after the approval has been given, whilst the construction is going on? If not, is that something we should consider?
Let me also clear this, that interestingly, I don't work there, you know, but I'm a concerned citizen and I have a fair idea of how processes work. The fact is, I think they should have it in place, you know, because as an agency, apart from getting the C of O, you must be part of the building process. You must have approved a building plan. And I think that at every point in the execution of an approved building plan, an official of the government should be on ground to monitor, you know, the compliance of such, structure, you know, while it's still in the formative stage. And I think that is why they have offices all over the place in different jurisdictions. So if they are in different jurisdictions, it's a responsibility to monitor. But to what extent is this monitoring taking place? That is one. Number two, even while you are monitoring, you won't be there on a daily basis. You understand? So I think the professionals, the contractors are number one culprit. You understand? And I've seen instances where even the LABCA or any government agency will put a red mark there, but you still see people, you know, building. So the challenge is for us to have the political will and to de-emphasize or to reduce to the barest minimum interferences that normally come outside the main agency, you know, that are responsible, you know, for implementing policies, principles, and practices associated, you know, with building construction, builder supervision, and of course management of it.
All right, quickly, I think we can, our hearts and our prayers to those affected by that collapse and the families who have lost their loved ones. And we hope that, of course, you know, we have less of this going forward. Every agency needs to be on its feet here in Lagos and across the country. But before we go, I think I'm just going to ask your quick thoughts in 30 seconds on the 1st of August, the planned nationwide protest. As a concerned citizen, What do you think about it?
Anyway, interestingly, I've been involved in activism as early as age 17. I've been involved in protests up to my College of Education days, up to the university. So I have a fair idea of what protest is all about. And it's fundamental right of every Nigerian to protest, of every human being. But what I detest is, of course, the nature of the protest. If you look at this protest we are talking about, nobody can identify who is even coordinating the protest, which makes it sad. And it makes it quite omnibus that you cannot even trace. You don't even know who you want to talk to. You don't even know who you want to feel his pulse and know exactly what's happening. I don't call it a protest, and I'm surprised that our media is, I don't know.
Yeah, but
listen, just listen. Yeah. If you have been following, it's been called 10 days of rage. And when you say rage, rage means violent protest, violent expression of anger. And it means violent expression of anger, then whoever is the organizer has given you an idea of the kind of protest you must expect.
Would you support it better if it was 10 days of peaceful protest? If that was the name?
If there was a name, why not?
So
if it was called 10 days of peaceful protest,
you would have been okay with that?
Oh, of course.
Okay, so it's a name you have an issue.
So it's just a name that is a challenge.
Yeah, the name has, you see, and I was listening to you when I was coming anyway, that the government is trying to ensure that maybe the prayer doesn't take place, or protesters are being threatened. I don't think so. They're not being threatened. But the nature, the disposition they have put forward, no characteristics, no names behind it, is faceless.
Yeah, but it's faceless. I believe it's faceless because the face of the protest is the Nigerian people.
Right. Well, the process hasn't yet happened. We have up until the 1st of August, and then we can have this conversation again. But thank you so much, sir, for joining us this morning.
It's my pleasure.
As I sign out of the show, I say thank you so much for being here with us. We'll see you again next week. It's time for the birthday girl to go have some fun. I am Olive Emodi.
And I am Osaugie Ogbon, wishing you all a great weekend, and see you on Monday.